So, mesdames et messieurs, so first, let me start with my deepest and most sincere apologies for not giving it in French. I thought about this, but I'm pretty sure it would not be favorable for you if I tried. So, I think I'll do it in English, and I hope that that works. So I should say I was not so sure about the audience. So I assume that not all of you are IT security experts in research. So I assume some of you might be slight outsiders. Maybe some of you look at it from a more economic or political perspective. So I tried to serve you all by first giving you some general vision on where we stand in research. Well, being a researcher, I want to dig into one of these topics in slightly more detail, right? So I think we have to have 2 or 3 content slides in a scientific talk. And then I want to focus on cross-border collaboration. So why I think this is crucial, how I think it should be done, and, well, why I believe that the synergies between Nancy and Saarbrücken, so between INRIA, LORIA, and Cispa, are ideal for this form of collaboration. So let me start in general. So where do we stand, right? So if you want to understand how cybersecurity research has evolved and where it will most likely evolve into, I think it's pretty good to look at how the internet has evolved in the first place, because most of the challenges that we face are somewhat aligned to what happened to the internet in the last 25 years. So in the early days, I could say the internet has pretty strongly evolved. So originally mostly used for email, it soon became a platform for business activities serving millions of users. Yeah? So from a security perspective, the major question was, what were the challenges and actually the assumptions we made at this time? So if you think back to this time that we dubbed the business internet, what did we assume? So we had 2 major assumptions. First, well, trusted computers connected to trusted services. So we trusted our machines and we trusted the endpoints. We were most concerned with the communication in between. And privacy was not really a problem, right? So we knew what we shared, that was exactly what we typed into, and if we didn't want to share, we didn't type it into the computer. That was arguably easy. So the question is, what has happened in the last 15 years? So essentially, well, this, right? So the internet has evolved from a, let's say, simplistic medium for communication serving millions of users to a global platform for, well, communication, education, entertainment, trade, political activism, used by billions of users. So the question is, what happened to our assumptions, right? So we had the trusted systems, and we had this privacy is not a big thing, right? Well, first, trusted components were replaced by very complex trust relationships. So we have mobile devices with strong sensing capabilities virtually all over the place, right? And we all use a variety of third-party software apps and services. So what does this mean as a consequence? It means that we are facing a massively or vastly increased attack surface, right? And we have heard more like IoT, which is about to come, autonomous cars. I could continue. All of these things offer you additional angles for attack. Second, well, dissemination of personal information. So we are seeing an unprecedented dissemination of personal information. Well, fueled by the advent of social networks and digital capture, so taking movies and videos every time, anywhere, and monetized by targeted advertisement. So it has become virtually impossible for experts, and even more so for end users, to even tell, let alone control, how your personal information is being disseminated in the wild. So if you asked us, me or us as security researchers, which guarantees can we give you still in that setting? So 15 years ago, we could give you some form of guarantee that your online banking is secure under the assumption that XYZ. Yeah. So which kind of guarantees do you think we still have in this setting? So I looked for an analogy that is easy to grasp, but easy to understandable. And I think, so I used this earlier, so some of you might know, I think I find one. The current situation is somewhat like this. Yeah? So attacking successfully means you manage to get in the garden. Yeah? So let me show you 4 possibilities which also pretty nicely illustrate what is nowadays difficult and what is easy. First, you squeeze yourself through the metal door. This is clearly the smartest option, right? That would correspond to a crypto breach. Second, you jump over the hedge. Yeah? That would correspond to a security breach. Or you would, let's say, closely monitor the person that owns the house and try to find out personal information about her. For example, where she deposits her key. Yeah? That would be a privacy breach. Or, which is often overlooked, you just ask a person that has legitimate access to the garden nicely to open a door for you. Yeah? That would be a human breach. Of course, I understand this analogy is by no means perfect. Yeah? But it sheds light on where the problems are from a research perspective. And well, compactly on one slide, we lack foundations. We really lack foundations in cybersecurity. So we lack a foundational understanding on how to assess and control privacy in a digital open world of the internet. We lack foundations for rigorously and well, comprehensively reasoning about the security of systems and services. We lack foundations to design systems that people can actually use securely. Except for the metal door. So I think crypto is way ahead of the pressing problems, having really gained a deep foundational understanding on how to build secure cryptographic algorithms. I should say quantum computing is on the horizon, and let's see what will happen. Yeah? But I think at the moment, nobody would squeeze through the metal door. Now you can ask yourself, is this more the perspective of an academic? So how we see it, so who needs guarantees in the end, right? But frankly, if you look in the newspapers, these threats manifest essentially on a daily basis. I just picked a few to get this. So we have massive breaches of privacy essentially every day in the newspaper, with people being constantly tracked and profiled. We have huge problems of accountability, that people can just misbehave without being held accountable simply because often you don't even know where the attack comes from. You have massive problems of compliance because large-scale companies often fail to adhere to the promises that they gave to the customer. And somewhat often overlooked, we have misplaced trust. Yeah? So we have seen this in some more or less sad way in elections, where even wrong informations were widely believed by the public. And we had similar cases, for example, in Germany a couple of years ago. If you Googled for the wife of the former German Prime Minister, yeah, you had suggestions by Google's auto-completion features that she had some bad, well, say some dark secret in her past, which wasn't true. But since more and more people searched for it, more and more people got the auto-completion, which caused even more people to search for it. So it became some form of internet truth, even though it was wrong. So if you put this in the extreme, on one angle, we have massive problems with privacy, accountability, compliance, and trust in various dimensions. Yeah. So what's the underlying reason? I mean, we've been doing cybersecurity research successfully, though, since many, many years. Still, I would argue that we are lacking foundations in many areas. So what is the reason? Well, the major reason is that cybersecurity research, if you think about this, that's inherently an arms race. We are the only science that has an attacker that tries to violate or bypass our protective results, right? So imagine physics, right? Somebody else comes and from time to time changes the law of nature. Be horrible for these people, right? We are facing exactly this situation. We're always in changing environments. So as a response, many researchers, as well as almost all developers, but also legislators, politicians, often respond on a case-by-case basis. So they are heavily driven by immediate needs and risks of current technologies. So as a result, we work on symptoms, while the root causes are often barely understood. To put it to the extreme, whenever Google announces a new operating system, everybody jumps on this, right, until the next operating system comes. As a researcher, that is deeply unsatisfactory. We should understand the root causes on the long run, especially if you look for, let's say, really large or high security critical systems where you cannot really afford an, if it fails, patch it approach. Yeah? And this actually is very nicely aligned with the research mission that Cispa has, that INRIA has as a whole, because we really strive for what we call giant leaps in the arms race. So really provably excluding whole classes of attacks, yeah, for good. And in particular, understand the root causes. So that's my general motivation, and we believe we need research to really get a grasp on this problem. Having that said, I want to show you 3, just on one slide, actual research contributions. That's the research part for the researchers amongst you. But I'll try to make it comprehensible for everyone. So there are actually many grand challenges you can look at. One is related to privacy, which I would argue for the citizens is the most severe. you have this rigorous security guarantees, you have a lot of problems in usability, you have next generation crypto and so on. But in the interest of time, I will just focus a little bit on privacy here today. I could have picked the others as well, but I had to make some selection. And my impression was this is more eye-catching and more to the layman than the other topics. So let me give you 3 examples and what research is currently doing there. The first is called privacy-friendly data aggregation. So how can you aggregate data for statistics, for example, in a privacy-friendly manner? And the use case I picked is called smart metering. I hope many of you know this. That's the small devices that you have in modern houses that really carefully monitor your energy consumption at every point in time and report it to the energy provider. Which is a great idea if you think about this, because the energy provider can plan much better. It knows when energy is being consumed, so it can schedule better, structure better. It's definitely a good thing for the planet. So I took as an example the consumption of one target household. Yeah? So the precise details here really don't matter. Let me just say that even based on this diagram, you can read off a lot of confidential information. Even the exact, in some cases, the exact TV channel you're watching. So the energy provider, if you think about this, is not really interested in such a very fine-grained approach. It wants to have some form of consolidated thing in some time intervals. So our goal as researchers would be, can we give an approach that aggregates these things in a way that is good for the energy provider, but based on which you cannot extract, for example, when you put on which device in your house, so in an aggregated manner. So the approach we take, just the only slide here with a formula, is called differential privacy. Roughly it means that you take 2 possibilities, yeah, and you cannot even tell which one is which. So in the example it means you take the consumption with your household contained, and in the other example you take the consumption of all households except for your household. And if you cannot tell the difference, then obviously you're pretty well blended into the crowd. If the product doesn't even see if your contribution was in there or not, this works. And well, how do you do this? Just as a takeaway from a scientific side. You start randomizing this stuff. So you don't report the actual consumption, but you add noise to this in a controlled manner. So you claim to have consumed slightly less, slightly more. Yeah? The idea is if you do this carefully, so with the proper distribution and so on, you can actually show that this thing is privacy friendly. So the energy provider cannot anymore tell exactly what you did, yeah, but it can still plan accordingly. Second example, how many of you know Tor? Great. Then let me tell you at least quickly how anonymous you are when you use this, right? So Tor is a principle for anonymous communication. Let me explain for those that don't know it in a few words how it works. Actually, what you do is if you use Tor, you select 3 nodes, 3 computers, 3 routers. Yeah? These are called entry, middle, and exit. Now, when you send a message to your destination, your messages are routed via these nodes using a so-called onion construction, right? So a message actually, if you do this, a message is encrypted 3 times, and every node peels off one of these layers until the message is finally delivered. The idea is that no single node sees where the message originally came from and where it's being delivered. Very simply. Now, you can ask yourself, what is an attacker? Consider of a 3-letter agency if you want, or anything else. Yeah? Assume the attacker can corrupt Tor nodes. Now you can ask yourself the question, how anonymous are you if an attacker corrupts certain nodes, which is realistic? And I should say, what we should do here is we want to derive guarantees for the user, really like a number. How anonymous are you at a given point in time using proper foundations? Before us, nobody has even dared to do that, right? I should say this is actually slightly more complicated than it sounds because node selection in Tor is pretty involved. So some of these nodes are pretty big, so they are chosen with higher probability, more likely. Some have some so-called family relationships, so they cannot be selected at the same time, and so on and so on, yeah? Now, what do? We first compute how bad it is for your anonymity if one node is corrupted. Forget about the math, it's a number in the end. But the interesting question is, how bad does it get if the adversary can corrupt a certain number of nodes in the system? For example, 10% of the nodes, or all nodes that are small, yeah? Something like this. So this corresponds to a so-called budget. The adversary has some money to spend if you want, right? And it spends this money for corrupting tone nodes or for adding new ones. Now, if you do some math, this corresponds to a so-called integer maximization problem that you have to solve, which doesn't work properly, so you have to approximate it, all taken. But the nice thing is, if you do this for the very first time, you can carefully compute and show how anonymous you are if the attacker spends a certain amount of money, energy, bandwidth, and so on. So just a simple calculation here. That's the bandwidth within Tor that you need to corrupt, and the lines is the anonymity that generates from perfect, which is 1, to 0, which means no anonymity. Let's take it quick. If you invest something like $100,000 per month, you can kill anonymity essentially completely. Yeah. You can even do it in a live monitor, which is a lot of fun, so you can tell people exactly how anonymous are you at this point in time if the adversary does certain things. Yeah? Okay. Final example, then we are done with the scientific part, and this is less technical, but more exactly from daily life, which I consider a way harder problem, where no solution exists, but I think that's the one that we should all worry about. So assume you have a user, Zoe. Zoe, like most of us, let's say she uses social networks. Yeah? So this is her real account. So she has real name, real age, really maybe the town where she was born. There she has some friends, she recommends movies and songs, and so on. Assume she's careful. So assume she does not enter any sensitive information there. Yeah? Which is not the case typically, but fine. Let's assume it for the example. Now let's assume in addition that she gets informed that she has a serious health problem. Yeah? So for example, a problem with her thyroid, yeah? Or to make it simpler, cancer. So what does she do? Many people seek advice in online forums, right? So for example, this is patientforum.co.uk, but there are many others where people enter, they explain in an anonymous manner what their symptoms are, which diagnosis they had, side effect of medication, essentially first to get expert opinions by doctors, but also to exchange with other people that have received the same diagnosis and they want to exchange how things work. Yeah. If she's careful, she would not give out her real name, of course. Also no real information, except for a very coarse-grained manner. Maybe the age bracket is important to get a proper diagnosis. Maybe gender makes a difference in how the treatment works. Maybe even the part of the globe where you're coming from is important. Yeah? So what you had in the end, this is some very coarse-grained thing which should not be de-anonymizing. Yeah? Now, in addition, like all of us, right, she also has a daily life, so she uses Google. She searches, for example, for alternative medication. Yeah, maybe also for when is the next concert of her favorite singer, Neva Nielsen, when is the election in her home country, Somalia, and so on. So I would consider this an extremely realistic scenario, actually simplistic. The reality will be way worse. I would argue that privacy is lost already. Why? If you think about this, and you are the attacker and you want to link things, right? What do? First, there are so-called direct cues, right? So you could guess that these two are the same persons. But this is a pretty wild speculation, right? Because there are many, many people that are female, born in Somalia, and 25 to 30 years of age. Yeah? But still, it narrows down the possibilities to some extent. Sometimes you can leverage this further, because sometimes these people might have the same friend structure and so on. But still, this is some wild speculation. However, what is not wild speculations? Look at these two things. Yeah? If we were carefully able to understand what she writes and what she searches for, it's pretty clear that these two are the same persons. You can either believe me there, or you can make an experiment, type things into Google, and just see, right, which ads do you get, how good are they in matching you to other profiles. The answer is they're really good. Yeah? It's pretty clear, because whenever you keep on searching, you become unique pretty soon. Now you could argue, what's the problem, right? I mean, you can link two anonymous persons, an anonymous health forum person and an anonymous search person. However, in the search history, she typically also searches for things that she considers not security critical and related to her daily life. Yeah? And if you think about this makes her pretty much unique to her Facebook account, which is easy, right? That's exactly what people do if they do profiling. But now, of course, transitivity kicks in, right? So if these two are the same, and if these two are the same, then these two are the same as well. Should be clear to everyone. The problem that I just described is something that's in research is fully unsolved. It's called semantic linkability, right? So how can we ensure that our information is not badly linked in ways we have never expected it to be, and then leads to very undesired consequences? So we gave many thoughts to this as was part of an ERC Synergy grant, but I think there is a person that can explain it way better than I can, and I hope that this works now, because too often it does not. No, it does not. For some reason, the voice is gone. Let me just say, this is Lisa Simpson from The Simpsons, and she explains the following thing. She says, wouldn't it be cool to have a program that would simulate all consequences of my information sharing before the information is actually shared? If my simulation shows that you have a bad consequence, then you can warn the user, in this case it was her dad, yeah, as always, that maybe this consequence, maybe this information shouldn't be disclosed because you can already foresee the bad consequence. This was beginning of this year. What truly shocked me is our Synergy grant got scooped by The Simpsons. So we received this 2.5 years ago, and 1 year later, a complete Simpson episode featured what we had in mind for the Synergy grant. I have no idea if that's good or bad, yeah? But at least, apparently, we caught an interesting problem. Let me at least give you a glimpse on how this works on one slide, and then we go to the necessity of cross-collaboration. So how does this work? If you think about this, just on a very high-level perspective, you have a user that has her own privacy preferences. So you have to say which consequences in general are bad for you, which are acceptable, which are debatable. This changes from user to user. Yeah? You will have a so-called knowledge base. Knowledge base means, we have to know the world. We have to have a model of the world, ontologies, Wikipedia, social networks, and so on. Otherwise, we cannot simulate a consequence. And you have to have what we call simulation. You need to have a probabilistic model that simulates all potential actions, filters out those things which are most relevant, and then explains the consequences in an understandable manner. I should say, this is not one paper, this is not 100 papers, that's a huge research agenda for many, many people, but in principle it could work. So this is a good point in time, actually, to go over to synergies from international research. Endeavors like this, or others, like, for example, autonomous driving, IoT, they will not be solvable by one research site, irrespective of how strong they are. This seems clear, and many people reacted by collaborating anyway, but I believe we really need more. I think we need structural collaboration between strong sites to build holistic clusters in the end that can assume a leading position in the world. So why is this the case? I think this you will all know, right? IT security and privacy don't stop at borders. There are cross-border constraints, data is being shared across borders, attacks are mounted across borders, and we already try to get, for example, law enforcement across borders. So the most natural thing is now also to do research across borders in a much more structural and principled manner that we have done so far. So why should we do this? I think I have one slide for the motivation. I think in the end, everything we do, if you think about this, is based on trust. So we are using systems that are built elsewhere, and we're trusting that they do what they should. We're using software that is programmed elsewhere, and we assume that it does what it should. In the end, we're trusting the delivery chain, the developer, the programmer, the manufacturer, all these things. If we want to have some form of technical sovereignty in Europe, then actually, ideally, we only have two chances. Yeah? None of them is fully realistic, but I think we should strive for this. The first is we develop all these components ourselves, including research, including development, manufacturing, shipping, product marketing. Or we are willing to import them, but then we have to be able to inspect them, which means we have to be able to somewhat tell, at least gain confidence, that they do what they claim to do. Yeah? So if you think about how this works, yeah, this requires clearly, in any case, a strong cross-border collaboration, either for building all these things or for building up the expertise in holistic sites to be able to analyze these components. Yeah? And I would dare to argue in the area of cybersecurity, this is where we discussed it many years ago already, we believe we are in a unique position here in the heart of Europe to build such a center. So if you look at the strength of Saarbrücken and Nancy in this respective area, they are pretty much the same. I think we both share the goal and desire for scientific excellence. That's what we are known for. That's what we stand for. We are hotspots for cybersecurity research in our respective countries. Yeah? We are surrounded in an extremely active environment. So in Saarbrücken, it's university, it's two Max Planck Institutes, DFKI, and many more. You have the LORIA network here, not only INRIA, but University de Lorenz, CNRS, and many more. We are known as elite training grounds for researchers, and we have manifold industrial collaborations. And maybe the most important thing, we are in close physical proximity. I would never underestimate this. In the end, it makes a difference if you can just drive over once a week, or if you really have to collaborate only across Skype. So we just started the Cispa Stanford Center, which we're really proud of. The close proximity is questionable, but the collaboration is great. Here I would say let's have a great collaboration and in addition having close proximity. So why do I think this is the ideal site? Scientific excellence, I already said. Both sides have been collaborating since many, many years on various topics, including cybersecurity, but also originating in logics and algorithms and so on. In addition to research, I believe we should set ourselves the goal for helping establishing European IT security standards that what you mentioned. In the end, somebody has to be able to push this from a research site to define what good standards are, maybe even help in a certification and so on. And I believe we are well qualified for offering guidance there. I think what we have been doing in our original countries anyway is engaging in a dialogue with citizens and politicians. I think that's very important, not just to do the research for ourselves, but to also go out, explain people what we do and why they actually benefit and in which respect from what we are doing. I believe we should stop thinking about France and Germany. I think we should consider itself the grand region and do this jointly, right? Industrial collaborations, we already have many joint ones. I think they can be intensified. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we should. Also, joint fundraising in the European Union will be way easier if we do it across borders. Yeah, of course. Plus, as I already said, the close proximity. Let me conclude by saying, if you look carefully at the sites, so what we actually do, you see amazing synergies. So many people are working together anyway. Topic-wise, it fits extremely well. Both sites already hold unique, pretty top positions internationally in IT security research. Well, many companies that are leading in IT security are between Germany and France, also large scale like Airbus, for example. And I believe having a joint institute, especially so a transnational one in this case, is exactly the right thing to do, because just doing it on a point-by-point basis does not really warrant what we are capable of doing. So let me conclude by saying, actually by quoting what our federal minister said. So she said, "We want to achieve a new quality in international scientific cooperation and takes the internationalization strategy a step further." Great, let's do exactly this, right? What we suggested 2 years ago, one of the reasons why I think this event is also taking place, to get people to know each other, to make you aware that this initiative exists, and also to push further into making it in existence. So if that's the status today, let me conclude by saying I hope that in 30 years we'll reach something like this. Don't ask me how, but we try hard. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael. One or two questions? Don't hesitate. Sure.
Thank you for the presentation. It was very, very appealing. You mentioned that you are welcoming newcomers. How can it be?
Can you say it again? Just repeat.
You just mentioned that you are also welcoming new parties to join the initiative at the moment in your speech. How can it be?
Which page are you referring to? This one?
Yeah, yeah.
So which item are you referring to? That we are welcoming newcomers?
New parties. Okay,
new parties.
Where's
this on the slide? I'm not pretty sure.
Because these are people from the systematic cluster in Paris.
You mean
Paris area? Okay. So how can they
Sure. I wasn't sure. I thought you would be local. Consequently, I couldn't phrase the question. I mean, in general, I mean, the goal is to establish a German-French collaboration. I think you need some, let's say, nucleus that shapes and structures this. The natural approach was to unite Nancy and Saarbrücken. I mean, a long-standing tradition, close proximity, and so on. Of course, we are open to other partners as well, under the assumption that we don't sacrifice, so we don't want to become a huge project where everybody is involved somehow, because in the end, to me, that's the death blow for everything we want to do. So we want to keep it small and dedicated to excellence, but we were thinking anyway to include, for example, people from the Paris region and so on. But this is currently in the formative stages. So we are thinking about expanding and adding partners as well, always under the assumption that we're not violating this nucleus constraint, because if it becomes some big European consortia, we will not achieve what we want to do. And I think we all agree on this, right? No, sure.
Thank you. Another question? Short one? Okay.
Yeah, so I'm Matthias Schutter from Intel. I have to confess, I actually liked your first picture better than the second one. And I think the underlying point is, I think economics plays an important role. So securing every little home, which may even be empty like Fort Knox, may not be the future I would like to live in. So economics should be an important part of the security considerations. That's my point. What do you say?
I fully agree. I mean, this was more for the show catcher at the end, as you know, right? I mean, but I mean, in the end, I mean, this slide has maybe three main items to take away. The first is to show where we are strong and we're still lacking foundations. So at the moment, I would not try, for example, to make the metal door stronger. I think it just doesn't make sense, and we have to understand that we are investing, at least those that do, potentially on the wrong end. Second, it explains the need for foundations. I think we would agree. And third, yes, we will not be able to secure the house, but I would strongly argue to focus on the weaker links than on the stronger ones. Yeah, not trying to secure everything completely, but I think in the end, we'll fix the obvious problems first before you try to harden the thing that works. Yeah, and I think we agree.